Okay, so sharpening 101, I did explain about the bevels needing to be flat. Now, when you go to sharpen a gouge, it is very difficult to rock the thing, along the round and do it by hand like this. It's pretty well impossible for me. Myself, I have invested in a lot of machines to help me sharpen these things, but to do it by hand, it is necessary impossible if you're in the field. So one way is, and I'll explain what I've got in front of me here. So these are diamond stones, they would call. Advantages of diamonds, they stay flat forever and sharp. They last a long time. They're a bit of an investment. So I have this extra coarse and fine and extra fine. I really hardly ever use this. I've used it to resole planes, and that's about it. I like to have some water on hand, and I like the diamonds to be wet with water, and then I just clean them off. And the same with when I'm sanding with the papers, sharpening with the papers. So this is something I learned from Kristen Doc Smith. This is a diamond card, it's called. It's a diamond file, and it's just small and handheld. You could do the same with some of these papers, and what these are different grit papers made for sharpening. These came from Lee Valley, but you can use wet dry sandpaper. I think the grit ratio might be about 400, 600, and 1200 for your, kind of a common go, at the 400 being more aggressive, and the 6 and 12 towards polishing. I'm not exactly sure. They call this 600 mesh. This is considered a fine diamond. That was the equivalent of this. It's not an extra fine. But what Kristen does with his is he holds it up where it's eye level, and you can actually, you rock it and you feel where it's flat, and then you can move it up and down and slowly rock, and I'm rocking it to me, and now I'm coming back and I'm rocking it to you. And then you can look and see where you've been cutting. This is tricky for me because everything's moving around. Everything I've learned about sharpening is like, it's on the bench and it's solid, and then, I have two. This is the other motion, is a figure of 8, and then my arms are still, my body's walking back and forth. And that's maybe a little easier for a flat, for a chisel. I find it really difficult with the gouges and the curve, because you need to be able to move this way. So that is another way of sharpening, is back and forth and back and forth. These guys here, like I say, this is just glued to a flat background. And we can do the same thing here. Be good to clamp that back and forth and back and forth up the grits. You will, when you're sharpening, develop what's called a burr. So you will, when you're getting it sharp, that bevel will fold over this edge a little bit. And then you need to have some sort of burnishing tool or something to, cut that across flat again and clean that edge up. So what these are is dowel with these different grits glued on, and I glued them. I rarely do that. I mostly did this for the demonstration. I really don't have the patience so much what I'm doing usually is just taking a piece of dowel. Oh, I thought I had it out. Just taking a piece of dowel and using a piece of paper. There we go. Wrapping it around and using it like that. Because I tend to go through a lot of the stuff. The other way to sharpen these is to put it upside down on the bench, clamp it. And then use your card or, maybe a single board or your dowel. And you can work on it this way. I like this because you can really see where you're cutting, and that's kind of the best thing for me. But like I say, I'm a little bit spoiled. I use my machines to sharpen the gouges because they're made for gouges, and it works just really well and really fast. Now, sharpening hook knives, this is the standard for me, holding it firm. Ideally it's clamped, and then I start, depending on how dull it is, with the more aggressive, and I just put a bit of water on the edges, on the bevels. Can you see that?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and now remember what I was saying, you want that thing flat, so the trick is not to be going but really flat. You either want to come across the edge like that or away from the edge. Typically not so great to be going back and forth too much. I find going off the edge gives me a little bit more control. And I'm just going to keep going back and forth. I can tell from the marks that I'm making if I'm flat across the way and coming right off the edge. You really, really need to be coming right off the edge. Moderate to firm pressure. And then you move. Actually, after that stock removal, with the heavier grit, it's good to come to a block like this, and because that will fold the edge over this way, and so I want to flatten the back again. So I'll bring it to the diamond and just draw it across real flat. And make sure that I've taken any burr off, and then I'm keeping the bottom really nice and flat. And then I'll bring it back and clamp it again. And I'll go to the next grit. And it takes as long as it takes. Demonstration purposes, I'm going to fly through these. At this time, I'm really not making a burr anymore. I'm really just polishing this edge. So I find it's fine to flip over to the last one. And this is the one seems to me to be actually cutting even more than the green and making a nice mirror finish on that edge. Pop that out, go to my fine, and flatten that bottom. Now, that's a pretty mirror finish, sharp edge. A lot of people, and If your blade just needs a little touching up and it doesn't need a whole sharpening, then what we've got here is a piece of leather glued to a piece of dowel, and it's got this green sharpening buff, which is actually a grit, and it's just applied onto the leather. It's often called honing. This green stuff comes from Lee Valley. It's a dynamite cutting compound. And the same idea. So if the knives, some people do this at the beginning of every day. Whether the knives feel sharp or not, they will hone them up. It's probably really, really good practice. I generally don't do it until they really need it, and then it's probably late in the game. But that honing actually makes a really big difference in the keenness of your edge and the cleanness of cut and everything like that. So this is ceramic. I know that Greg uses this from Kestrel as a means of sharpening instead of these. It's actually, however, super baked to be like harder than steel, so it will cut the steel. I haven't had brilliant luck with this. I like the feel of the paper better. Personal preference. And then same, this is like a diamond hone with fine and extra fine, which is great for in the field, so-called, for sharpening your flat edges. Again, with the diamonds, I like to use water to lubricate it. It helps them not plug up. Now, if knife is totally messed up and the bevel's round and just not working or not cutting, I will get into using something like this on a drill, which is kind of made for sanding, but when you dull them down, that actually cuts steel, and it's nice and flat. So you can correct the bevel with that really carefully. It's tricky business. You could ruin a knife. And conversely, this is a diamond bit on a Dremel, and you can use that to take the bump out of that bevel. Once you get a bump in there, it's really hard to get it out. So that's why I'm kind of inherently impatient. So I like these little shortcuts, things to try to help me get there, and then I'll hone it, afterwards. So same thing for the hone. With this is like a hone on its back for the flat. And a lot of people would have a piece of leather glued onto a board like that and use that for your final hone. So that's your quick and dirty sharpening demonstration. Like I say, the essence is that flat, straight bevel, and some patience, and having all the different grits was really the way to go. And then, it's like this whole thing is a giant learning curve for the rest of our lives. So be patient with yourself. I try to practice that patience myself. This is kind of a work in progress, and I hope you learned a lot today. Thank you for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you at future festivals in person. Thank you very much, Mark, for your patience and your professionalism today. Say choo, klecko, klecko.